JJ, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Looking forward to it.
So, I want to start our conversation where everybody else left off. You announced your retirement in December of 2022. So, what have you been doing since then?
It's been a little bit of retired life and a little bit of trying to figure out what the next step of life looks like. But it's been a lot busier than anticipated, that's for sure. A whole lot of time spent with my family. I mean, my son just turned one yesterday, so it's been a crazy, great, incredible, happy year for us. But also just trying to figure it out. I knew for sure that I didn't want to jump headfirst into any full-time job. So I'm working with CBS right now on select weekends throughout the year to do some analyst work. I do the Pat McAfee show on Wednesdays from the comfort of my own house, which is great. We're minority owners of Burnley in the Premier League, which is awesome. And then some endorsements and some other things here and there. But a whole lot of time spent at home with family and just enjoying it and trying to get around, see my brothers, see my parents, spend a lot of time together.
Has it been hard to say no to all the opportunities that I'm sure came your way after?
It has been, but it's something that I've been practicing over the years that I was really bad at early in my career. And the further along in my career I got, the more I realized how important it is to be able to say no and how important it is to prioritize the things that you want to make a priority in your life. So this first stage of my retirement, I knew that my son, my wife, my family are absolutely number one priority, which they're obviously always going to be. But I knew that I was not going to take any job that took me away from them for any extended period of time because I wanted to make sure I had that time. And I didn't retire just to jump right back into full blown work.
Yeah, I and when I was doing my research, I read this profile of you from 2015, and in it you said something like, "One day when I have a family, I want to be all in, just kind of how I'm all in on football right now." So your son, you mentioned you just turned one yesterday. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you've learned from him in the last year?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to go back quickly to what you said about that interview because I think it's something I was just speaking about with a buddy of mine who's a professional baseball player the other day. Um, when you're an athlete, obviously you want to be the best in the world, and to be the best in the world, you have to commit every single thing that you have to that. That means food, that means sleep, that means recovery, that means energy, that means time, that means your mind. When you have a child, obviously then you're starting to make decisions. You're starting to, okay, am I going to, study that extra hour of film, or am I going to spend time with my son? Am I going to, prioritize my sleep, or am I going to wake up in the middle of the night and help? All these little decisions and things that are that add up. And we were having this conversation, and the conversation turned to, can you be the best at both? Can you be as great of an athlete as physically possible and also the greatest father as possible? Now, in an ideal world, we can say, yeah, absolutely. You no doubt can. And I do think that there is something to be said for dad strength and dad, like I had my son last season and I had 10 games left. In those 10 games, I had 10 sacks. I played some of my best football after my son was born. I think
Interesting.
there's I think there is something to that. You want to make your son proud. You want to, you just feel this extra sense of purpose, this extra sense of wanting to accomplish something great. But you absolutely do suffer in other areas if you want to be a great father. There is just simply no question about it. I mean, when you're waking up at 2 a.m. to change a diaper, you are not getting the best recovery you can possibly get. Now back to the thing that I've learned from him. The thing that I've learned from him is hands down how to just appreciate each day and be happy. I mean, there is nothing like waking up and seeing your son smile. I mean, whether it was after a loss last season or it was after a day where you just don't feel that good, there is nothing better than your son's smile and knowing nothing else matters. Like none of this stuff that I'm worried about, he doesn't care about any of that. And I think I've become a lot less stressed because of him.
Yeah, it really is interesting. Our daughter's going to turn 2 in November. And it's so funny because you try to prepare so much before you have a baby. And then you really just don't know until you're in it at 2 a.m. and you're like, oh yeah, wow, this is totally different from what I expected.
And what becomes normal is crazy. Like that would be chaos when you were like 5 years ago. You'd be like, wait a second, you want me to wake up at 2 a.m. and do what? And now it's like, yeah, no, it's just what we do. What do you mean?
It's so funny. Um, so you once said, if you want to be remembered as great, if you want to be a legend, you have to go out there every single day and do stuff. Very eloquently said, JJ.
Yeah.
But you've recently been doing a lot of investing and kind of delving more into the business world. What are things that you're doing that you hope will make you one of the greats in business, in entertainment, and whatever path you pursue from here?
I think what I'm doing right now is a little bit of that I so eloquently put it, doing stuff. I'm doing stuff in an effort to A, obviously, hopefully hit on some opportunities, but B, learn and grow. Throughout sports, I mean, I kind of relate it to football in ways. If I want to learn a new pass rush move, or if I want to learn something in my game, I go out in the practice field, I work on it, I learn what works, I learn what doesn't work, and then I evolve it and I move it forward. That's kind of what I'm doing in investing and in business and in entertainment right now. I'm trying things, and I'm never going to put all my eggs in one basket, so that I learn and I grow. I invest in, a handful of items here in different categories and diversify it. And then I see, okay, this didn't work for this reason. That didn't work for that reason. This was extremely successful because of this CEO or this strategy that they used. And then I use that and I evolve and I grow. And the next round of investments that I do, I apply the things that I learn. And that's kind of what I'm doing with my entertainment world right now also, is I'm dabbling in CBS, the McAfee show, and endorsements, and figuring out, okay, this is good for the lifestyle I want to live. This is too
Yeah.
much work and I don't want to do it. And you just kind of evolve.
Yeah, I want to come back to the business investing stuff a little later, but I also read that you've said that you've always kind of been your biggest critic. So since you retired, what has been the hardest thing during that transition that you're actively working on?
Competition, finding the competition and finding ways to fill that adrenaline rush that you don't get. There's plenty of things that are great about retirement, tons. I mean, I love it. I wouldn't change it, obviously, for the world, because I'm very, very happy. But the one thing you miss is going up against the best in the world and seeing where you stack up on a weekly basis. So I mean, I'm trying it with golf, but I suck at golf. I'm trying it with, I mean, investing and weightlifting and a whole bunch of different things, but nothing can scratch that itch for you. So it's just something that you have to kind of learn and evolve and move on with.
I actually wanted to ask you about that. So when I was reading something that Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote. He's the writer
Mm-hmm.
of Hamilton, and he said, "I like the quiet it takes to pursue an idea the way I pursued Hamilton, but I couldn't write a book because there's no applause at the end of writing a book." And you said something very similar recently, where you said, "I come from a sport where if you get a sack, there's this energy, there's cheers, there's something about this adrenaline, where if you do movies and you crack a joke or say the perfect line, there's crickets." And you said,
Yeah.
"I do not like that." So how do you get that adrenaline today? Or have you still not found that outlet?
No, it's hard. It's really hard. I said that on Fallon, and it's the truth. He was asking about Saturday Night Live. And Saturday Night Live was one of the most fun experiences for me outside of football, because you get that. You get that live feeling. You get that adrenaline rush from going on the stage and knowing I can make these people laugh. I can make these people feel a certain way, and you can get reactions. And I think that as an athlete, you go into that arena and that, I think that's the biggest part of it, is that you have the ability to control an entire stadium, an entire city's feelings and emotions. And obviously, having been a fan and knowing what that feels like to watch your favorite team play and to see somebody make a play, there's just nothing like that. And we always talk about like controlling the volume knob of a stadium or of a city. And at the peak of it in Houston, there was nothing better. There was no better feeling than when it was a big third down and it was time for somebody to do something. And then you go out there and make that play. But I don't know where you find it now, because if you want to, I think the thing that I would love to do that I'm just not talented enough or have enough time to work it all out. I think stand-up comedy is something that's an incredible, like similar thing. You can go into arenas, you can do things, and you can make a whole place. You can kind of have a whole stadium in the palm of your hand. But those guys work for years and years and years at their craft, and it takes a lot of practice and probably a lot of flopping and falling on your face. So
I love
I'm not quite ready for that. Out of the best.
I love stand-up. My husband thinks that he can also be a stand-up comedian. So he was like, what if at our wedding reception, I can just go around like roast I was like, what are you talking about? This is not the time or the place.
No, there's a lot of people I've seen that think they can do things that they can't. I mean, in my world, people tell me on Twitter every week what they think they can do. And yes, sure, you could go get a sack. No problem.
In a weird way, like you're really good at Twitter. In a weird way, doesn't Twitter kind of fill that adrenaline rush? You get an immediate reaction.
Yeah, it does. Like I do think that social media gives you a little bit of that. You're interacting. I think interaction and being able to have those conversations is fun. It's just, to me, there's nothing like the physical aspect of sport, and I think that's also something that I'm coping with as I get further into retirement. Is my whole life I could work really hard at something physically in the weight room, on the field, running. And I knew if I worked harder than you, I would be better at it. In business and entertainment and a lot of these things, it's not necessarily always that exact linear path to I'm going to work harder and thus be better. And it's fascinating. It's hard to find.
That's such a good point. So what I found really fascinating when I was reading that profile I just mentioned in 2015 is that it seemed like you were hyper aware of the opportunity that you had, and you never really took it for granted. And you said, nothing about my life now will ever be normal because it's not. It's crazy, it's absurd, it's awesome, it's unbelievable. What are some of the most surreal experiences that you've had as a result of football? And how did you manage to kind of stay grounded?
I mean, it's a battle. Sometimes I was good at it, sometimes I wasn't. I had a lot of people around me who helped me with that. My brothers are the first; they'll ground me real quick. But I mean, there's so many crazy things over the year. Halloween's coming up right now, and I was just talking to my neighbor who was like, "Are you ready for Halloween?" Because we moved into a new place, and people are starting to figure it out. But back in, I think it might have been 2014, 2013, 2014, back kind of at the height of it in Houston. I was living in, just a regular neighborhood. It was still my rookie house and no gate, no anything. Everybody knew where I lived. And I was driving home from the facility after work at like 6 p.m. And there was like I was 2 miles away from my house, and there was this line of cars. And I was like, where are all these cars doing? Is there like an accident or something? And I just kept driving to my house. And I was like, wait a second, all these cars are going right to where I'm going. And sure enough, I get to my neighborhood, and there's 2 mile long line of cars was at my house. People were driving from everywhere to come trick or treat at my house. And I pulled up, and at my door, there was just a stacked up pile of things that people had left. And one of the things on the pile was a MapQuest directions from Dallas, Texas, 4 hours away to my house in Houston.
Wow.
And it was crazy. Yeah. So it was a lot of stuff like that. A lot of things like that. And I think the hardest thing that I had to deal with from it all was, people asking for money. I've had people show up at my door with a baby and saying like, we don't have any money. Can you help us? Or I've had people with medical situations, and that got really, really hard and weighed on me super heavy because you want to help every single person possible. It's so difficult.
Yeah, and you do a lot of philanthropy. You've raised more than 41 million to help Houston recover from Hurricane Harvey. You offered to pay for the funerals of the victims of the Santa Fe, Texas school shooting. And then during the pandemic, you and your wife donated $350K to the Houston Food Bank. So I personally struggle with this, but in a world of so many opportunities to help, especially financially, how do you choose when and where to contribute?
It's really interesting. I just had this conversation the other day because we were talking about colleges and high schools and people donating back to their universities or people donating back to their high schools. I'm very fortunate. I come from a town where I went to a really good school district. I had both my parents went to a good school district, never had to worry about could we afford food, could we afford athletics, could we afford any of that. I also obviously went to the University of Wisconsin, great university, very prestigious. And part of the reason that I was able to do those things was because people provide those opportunities in one way or another. And people were like, are you going to give back to your high school or your university? The reality of it is I went out into the world and I saw people that were in 100 times worse situations than I was in, whether it was kids in elementary schools and middle schools, colleges, kids not having opportunities. So for me, when I choose to donate money and give somewhere, I always say, where can this help the most? Like, how can I possibly make this go the furthest? And so it's always trying to find ways. That's why our foundation, we have a threshold for kids who are on free or reduced lunch, because that helps tell us which areas are in the most dire need, which students really literally don't even have food on the table and don't have those opportunities. So anytime my wife and I are trying to figure out where we're going to help and donate, we're trying to find the most impactful way to do it. And maybe that's wrong, maybe it's right, but that's just the way that we've personally chosen to do it.
And how long have you been doing your foundation at this point?
We've been doing it since I was in college. So I believe it started in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah, so 12, 13 years.
Are there any really big lessons you've learned?
I think the biggest lesson that I learned is when you're having a foundation. I mean, there's a lot of lessons, but I think the two of the biggest lessons that I've learned are have somebody that you really, really trust and that you know is always going to do right by the foundation and by the people that donated and the people that are receiving the funds. My mom she helps run my entire foundation. Awesome. She's incredible. And we are extremely diligent and extremely proud of how hard we work to donate as much of every dollar as humanly possible. I think that if you look at, all these different watchdog companies and everything and look at charities, there's so many charities that unfortunately don't do it that way. And we just always said we want to do it as right as we possibly can. And then the second thing that I would say is having a very focused mission and knowing exactly who you're helping, why you're helping, and keeping that locked in, because we've chosen after school athletics in middle schools in underprivileged areas. Yeah. So now we know for a fact that's who we're helping. So if a high school comes, if an elementary school comes, unfortunately we say no, but because we have a very direct mission, we know who we're helping.
Yeah, and you have like a hyper focus. I feel like that's where a lot of people go wrong. I want to ask you this. I always wonder about when somebody's had a taste of fame or a taste of success, they start taking it for granted and they stop working as hard and stop taking as many risks as maybe they did in the beginning. How did you continuously fight complacency after you'd had a taste of success?
I think that I was always scared of what would happen if I didn't work that hard. And I was very fortunate. My parents just raised me that way. I mean, my mom started as a secretary at her company and she worked her way up to become the vice president. My dad was a firefighter. Like they both worked extremely hard. So I had two good examples and I had no reason or no ability to have any excuses. And so even when all the good times came and everything was fun, they were constantly making sure that I was, doing everything the right way. And complacency kills progress. It's one of my favorite quotes. Like, if you want to evolve, if you want to be better, if you want to improve, complacency is the number one way to halt all of that. So I was just always trying to find a way to be better. And I do think that in a physical sport like football, that can be to a fault, which with some of my injuries, it was. I mean, I literally during the season was doing 2-a-day workouts during the practice week. So I'd come in the morning and do a workout, go to meetings and practice, and then do a workout in the evening, which in my mind was like, I'm going to work harder than everybody else. I'm going to be better. But it actually ended up being to my detriment because I would get hurt. I mean, you overtrain and you're not. So it does become, you do have to be smart about it. But that's something that I constantly think about and wonder what that proper balance is. And anybody who says they don't have any regrets is lying, because there's always something you can do different. Always something you can improve and do better.
It's almost like a double-edged sword. If you're not, you have to be vigilant about it. But then if you're too vigilant, it can be too
paralysis by analysis. Yeah, you can literally overthink and overtrain and do things. And it's a very fine line to find.
In your career, I'm sure you've seen guys who kind of gave into complacency. When do you see it happen?
You see it at many different points. I think the more interesting part for me is when guys realize it,
Mm,
because some guys realize it early enough and catch it to where then they change themselves and become a better player or a better, competitor, train. But then there's guys, which has happened all the time, whether it was high school, college, or the NFL, guys will come back later and say, man, I wish I would have just been more disciplined. Man, I wish I would have focused on it. It's something that I talk to a lot of rookies that come into the league about, or anybody who asks for advice from me. I always say, don't get caught up in the lifestyle, because the lifestyle will be so much better if you play good. Like, people come in and they're so excited about everything that comes along with being an NFL player that they forget the reason they're getting all this is because they're an NFL player and because they're playing good. And so it's some guys don't realize it too late, and then they come back and they have those regrets. But I think that you have to realize that the work is what created all this, and the harder you work, more of the fun stuff you'll get.
I like that. It's like, it's not about when it happens, because it probably happens to a lot of people. It's like if you realize it too late.
Yes. And if you have good people around you to help you catch it, like that's the other
Yeah.
thing is I was fortunate. I had a bunch of good vets in my locker room when I was young. So they kind of taught me how to work, how to be a pro, how to go about this NFL life. If you go into a locker room that doesn't necessarily have those guys to teach you the ways or to get you back in line once you get off track, then you're in a tough way.
Yeah.
Nobody does it by themselves. Nobody.
That's fascinating. One thing is that, so, I'm no football pro, but when I was doing my research, a lot of people seem to really, really like you. So I think they may be surprised to find out that when you got drafted by Houston, you were actually booed on draft night, which is
Yeah.
shocking. And I think I was watching this Kobe Bryant documentary where at the lowest point in his career, people were booing him on the court. He said that at that moment, he developed this alter ego that he called the Black Mamba. So, yes, they were booing Kobe, but he had this alternate identity. Did you have something like that when you stepped out onto the field?
No, not quite, but I do. So like people ask about the booing situation all the time, which I mean, it was a very, I mean, part of it is it was draft night. I just got drafted 11th overall. Like I didn't, you go ahead, boo me. Like I just accomplished one of my childhood dreams. Like,
Go ahead, boo me.
I
It's
was
fine.
just so excited, like whatever. I didn't really realize it at the time, but also I think there was a part of me that had the confidence in my own abilities that just give it time. Like, don't worry. Like I'm going to show these people. And it gave me this extra sense of motivation because I believed, and again, this might be right, this might be wrong, but I believe that when a team drafts a first round pick, that person is coming in and has a chance to change an entire franchise, has a chance to change an entire city. So I was just looking forward to that opportunity. And I knew that the Texans had never been to the playoffs. I knew that they had never won the division, all these things. And so I was like, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to try and do everything I can to win these people over because they clearly right now might not like me. And I just looked at it more as a challenge and as a motivational thing than they don't like me personally. They just didn't like the pick. And we changed some minds.
Got it. So you are JJ Watt on the field is the same person as you are off the field.
For the most part, I would say it's just a different. I mean, there's nothing like stepping on the field. I don't think that I really changed personality that much.
Are you just as competitive with like when you're playing board games with your family?
Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem. I mean, my wife and I literally can't play Scrabble. Like we tried to play Scrabble on like vacation and it got to the point where we literally could not play against each other.
Were you
We
making
used to
up
work.
words?
That was I mean, we got the dictionary out and it was like, okay, which dictionary we're going to use? We're going to use
That's
this
funny.
dictionary. Oh yeah. But like we used to work out together and now it's like I'd look over and she's dominating something or I'm like, hey, I think your form is supposed to be like, and then it turns into a disaster. So, but yes, the competitiveness is every
Yeah.
single day, all the time. I need to be better. at it.
That's really cool. I just want a small asterisk here. So you and your wife, very similar to me and my husband, where you work, you work, or you have different passions in different industries, but they're complementary, and you know how to talk about them. It's an easy conversation. How have you found you and your wife do a lot of things together, business wise and personally? But what is it like to work together while also being married?
It's for me personally, it's been very successful because we complement each other very well. She is very good at understanding how to give me different perspectives and change. Like I'm very singularly focused and driven, and sometimes I can get so locked in on something that I don't take a step back and say, hey, let's take a look at this bigger picture. And I think that my wife does a really, really good job of helping me see perspectives that I don't always see, helping me look at things from different angles, helping me be more compassionate and sympathetic in situations that I may be more of a competitor and just like step on their throat. Like that's just kind of the way that I go about things. So she's been really good at giving me different perspectives and helping me think through different things. And she loves to read. She really, really loves to read. And I like to read. I strive to do better and read more, but I don't. Hidden Genius, great book, by the way. But so she's constantly giving me these little things and tips that she's reading, and we always talk about those, and then it transitions into a bigger conversation. So it's a lot of fun to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of. And yeah, every now and then it may turn into an argument, but that also makes you better in certain ways.
Exactly. My favorite quote is Sarah Blakely, who married Jesse Itzler. She said that the reason their marriage is successful is because it's 95% ideas, and they argue about these ideas, they debate them, they brainstorm together. But it's like if you read a lot, you can say something new you learned.
Yeah, no, it's great. How do you and your husband do? You guys good? Or you guys fight? How do we go?
How do we go? No, it's great. That's what I was going to say. He reads a lot. I also read a lot, but now it's a little bit of a competition. So every night we're like, what'd you learn today? And if you don't have something juicy to contribute, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But so you just said that nobody ever does anything alone. And I know that you've said before that you really like learning from other industries and applying those techniques to your own life, which I do as well. Who is a person, whether it's an entrepreneur, a musician, a politician, that you've learned the most from, whether you've met them or not?
Wow, that is a really good question. It's a bunch of different people. It's funny you brought up Jesse Itzler because I actually follow him and I've spoken to him a couple of times. And Jesse, there's a lot of things that I really enjoy following about Jesse. And one of those things is how he's obviously massively successful and completely financially set in every single way, but he chooses to go out and do all these incredible athletic feats and put on these races and the hell on the hill and all these things that he does, which is incredible. And most people in his shoes could say, I did it. I've accomplished it all. I'm just going to relax and go and enjoy life on a yacht. But he has chosen to put himself through pain and suffering and difficulty because he wants to push himself and be better. I love that. Ryan Reynolds and Wrexham and everything that he's done with maximum effort and his whole company and everything that he's accomplished and learning from him and some of those things. I've really enjoyed learning from Darren Rovell and some of the things that he's gone through and combining both business and sport. And Kobe was another one, how to be an athlete, but also how to be more than an athlete. And there's a lot of people that you take lessons from, and you're always trying to find new ways. One of the things when I was playing that I always liked to do was go to concerts and see how artists handled the crowd, handled the situation, see if there was anything you could learn from what they were doing, whether it was on stage, whether it was preparation, because I thought that was a really cool experience just to learn from another. I've learned this throughout the years. Like athletes always want to be musicians and musicians always want to be athletes.
Yeah, that's
fascinating. Yeah.
That's really interesting because both are, I guess, a little bit performative. You're kind of putting on a show in both instances.
Yeah. So like us, we look at them and we're like, wow, you go out into a crowd, you don't have to hit anybody or get hit. And you have, 70,000 people singing along to your songs. You get to sing and dance and you get to do it city after city. And we look at that and we're like, wow, that's unbelievable. And then they look at ours and they say, you get to go out there and you get to perform and you get to compete and you get to actually, physically do something. There's a win and a loss. So they crave the competition and the unknown of it, whereas we almost crave the known of every night you're going out on stage. That crowd is going to be great. That crowd is going to sing the songs, and you're going to have a great time. And so it's fascinating. It's kind of like grass is always greener. Would we actually like it if we didn't have the unknown of if we're going to be successful or not? And would they actually like it if they encountered a loss or a bad game and you have to deal with the consequences that come with it?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because I think about uncertainty a lot, and I feel like you're at a point right now where things are uncertain for the, better or worse, but it's like grappling with that is so tough.
Yeah, and
Um,
trying to like right now is a very interesting point. I mean, my wife and I speak about it all the time. Like, there's multiple different ways you can go. Right now, if I wanted to, we could just literally live a very normal life. We could fall off the grid and not do anything. There's been days where I've considered just all social media, everything gone, do nothing, and just be a family man. Then there's other days where you're like, should I go do movies? Should I go do TV? Should I really see how big we can possibly do this thing? Um, and grappling with that and trying to figure out which is best, not which is, not what you can make the most money doing, not what you can get the most famous doing, but what fits your lifestyle the best. That is the hardest thing because I don't lie to myself. Like I do enjoy that. I enjoy the crowd. I enjoy the interactions. I enjoy all of that. But I really also enjoy waking up on a Saturday, having a cup of coffee and sitting with my son and playing around in the living room in the backyard. So it's a
yeah.
battle that I'm constantly fighting, trying to find the answer.
It's like freedom. It's like if you had ultimate freedom, what would you do? And I think a lot of people
Right.
think they know the answer until they actually have it.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like I say it's kind of like the Cheesecake Factory menu. Like there's so many options where you're paralyzed by the amount of options.
Yeah. So, okay. So one thing that you have done in a path that you're going down is that you and your wife made an investment in Burnley Football Club earlier this year. What drove that decision?
So I've been a Premier League fan since about 2011, 2010, 2011. And I've learned about it over the years. Honestly, NBC's coverage of it has just been really good in America. And it's always been on before Saturday and Sunday practices or walkthroughs and games. So I wake up early and I'm watching those. And then, obviously, my wife, being a soccer player, has helped that as well. But as my career started to wind down, I also knew that I wanted to get into ownership and I wanted to have something to give me that adrenaline. And I can say like the closest thing that I have to the adrenaline of game day is now A, watching my brother play and B, watching Burnley. I mean, the amount of emotional investment that I have in this thing and the way that I watch these games is probably not
Yeah.
healthy. But it gives me that high and that low and that excitement and that it's I love it. I truly love it. And there's some things that you do where you're like, oh yeah, I like that. I love every single thing about this Burnley investment. I love the board meetings. I love the conversations about the business side of it. I love the conversations about the football side of it and the transfer market and our tactics and every single thing about it. I really, really love it.
Yeah. And it's a different level of investment when you have backed it like with your money. Now you're like really
Yeah.
invested.
Yeah.
Um,
Like I tell people, like a guy called me after this weekend's game, lost 3-0. And he's like, yeah, man, that was a tough one. I'm like, yeah, that one really, really hurt. We just didn't play that well. And he was like, it's funny because you can actually say we and mean it. Like most fans say we and they're like,
right.
okay, yeah, we, like you're not a part of the team. But yeah, no, it literally matters. It is us.
That's
It's
awesome.
crazy.
Um, so I saw that you've invested in also in companies, and this is from Crunchbase, so correct me if any of it is wrong, but It said that you've invested in companies including public.com, Future, High Price, and Athletic Brewing. Accurate? Okay.
Yep. Amongst others. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you an investor in Papa Bagel?
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. I saw it
Best
on your
bagel in the
Instagram.
world.
Yeah.
Best bagel in the
We
world.
we just moved back to New York and we love it. What is your
We're working to open some more locations, so don't worry. But the people are going crazy for them. It's awesome.
That's great. So how do you decide to invest in these companies? Like, what is your investment strategy and how do you think about it? Because your foundation's super narrow focus. How is this?
This is not anywhere near as narrowly focused. This is much more broad and diverse for a reason, because you want to branch out and want to see what's successful. And so, I mean, just like anybody else, it's all about deal flow. It's all about opportunities coming across your table and then reading through them and being able to understand the finances of it, the concepts of it, to make sure that you know what you want to see as an investor. Am I the smartest, most brilliant business mind of all time? Absolutely not. But do I know what I like and what I am comfortable investing in? Yes. Any time that I ever make an investment, I have to have the assumption that I'm going to lose every single dollar of that investment. That's just the simple way it goes. So whenever I'm looking at a deck and whenever I'm looking at opportunities that come across my desk, it's okay. Do I believe in this enough to where I think it can be extremely successful? Yes. And also, is this a business that if I invest in it goes completely to zero, am I okay with that? Yes. And then the third piece of criteria is, do I enjoy this? Is this something that I actually want to be a part of?
Personally.
Yeah. Like, do I like Papa Bagels is a perfect example. Like, I ate that bagel and I was like, yes, how do I get involved with this? This is fantastic. Other things like Athletic Brewing. Athletic Brewing is probably my best investment so far. I mean, it is absolutely incredible what Bill has done with that company. And I actually passed on it on their Series A round, and I got it on the Series B because I couldn't get myself on the non-alcoholic train at the beginning. I'm from Wisconsin. I grew up in Wisconsin. I was like, everybody there drinks beer. Nobody there drinks non-alcoholic beer. Like, what's the pull here? So I passed on Series A, and then Series B came like 3 months later at 3x, and I was like, oh, geez, this thing's really good. So I've been in it ever since. They've been incredible, but it's fun to watch and it's fun to be a part of. And absolutely, I've made mistakes. Like early on, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I said before, you have to make mistakes to figure out what you want to do. And so I've still got plenty of mistakes to make, but I'm much more focused in my investments now, and I don't take as many swings as I used to.
Are there any other companies that you're really excited about?
I mean, there's some bigger ones that obviously you're a smaller player if you're in a bigger investment. I mean, Bombas, Athletic Greens, some of those ones. Let's see, what am I most excited about? I mean, Kickstand is one that I'm excited about because I really enjoy it. It's a ready to drink, spice based alcoholic beverage. It's a cocktail.
So you got the non-alcohol category and the alcohol category.
Yes, I make sure that I have a well-rounded investment platform. And then I have Gatorade, obviously, as an endorsement deal. And so we got it all covered. You drink the alcoholic for a couple drinks, then you have a couple non-alcoholic, and then you wake up the next morning and you have some sips of Gatorade to get yourself rehydrated. It's perfect. But I really like that just because it's finding a niche. It's everybody, like if you literally look at the Google searches over the past 2 or 3 years, spice is up by 300, 400, 500%. People are starting to change their taste buds and they want something spicier. So we found a niche there and we're trying to attack that niche. And it's literally started from the ground up. So learning the branding of it, learning when to change your branding, how you get into big box stores and all the things that come along with that. It's fascinating.
When you make an investment, are you intimately involved, especially if it's the early stages, with the founding team, or are you more hands off?
If it's the early stages of a business and there are ways that I can help or be a part of it, absolutely. So the Kickstand literally on branding calls and on board meeting calls and all these types of decisions. You're figuring out your sales team. I'm absolutely in all those. Other ones, I mean, Bombas, for example, one of my favorite. I love wearing Bombas socks. They're unbelievable. It's an investment. I invested. I wear them, and that's about it. Like I'll post about them here and there. But some are more involved than others, And you have to figure out where your value's at. I mean, I'm not going to go into somewhere and talk to them about debt refinancing and what I think that we should do based on the current economic conditions. But if there is a branding play or a social media play where I can say, hey, I think this idea would work best for us to get eyeballs on us. I mean, it's one of the biggest things that I do about at Burnley is how can we increase our international profile and get more eyeballs on our program, because we're in the Premier League, but we aren't taking full advantage of everything that comes along with the Premier League.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You talked about diversification. Do you own any Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or things like that?
I do not. No.
Why not?
No.
Just
I
curious.
think it's, I mean, this is a battle that I feel like could get me into social media hell, like just people coming at me on both sides. But I think it's so speculative and there's just so much unknown in it, which is partially extremely exciting, which is something that you could be on board of a true rocket ship that is one of those things like, the internet back in the day, where if you figured it out before everybody else, you're now a billionaire and you're laughing and saying, how didn't you figure this out? But you could also be on the other side of it where it goes to nothing and nothing happens. And like NFTs or, where everybody thought they were geniuses getting these NFTs and now all of a sudden they're worth pennies on the dollar. So I'm not saying that it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the speculative aspect of that and also the lack of true knowledge of it in my space is just not something I'm comfortable putting any significant amount of capital to.
Got it. And so when you're making these decisions about like what companies to invest in or where not to put your money, do you have a mentor, somebody in the business world that you turn to talk about this stuff with?
I have like a few different avenues whenever I'm making investment decisions to get information. Yes. So I have a couple friends / mentors who I'll say, hey, what do you think of this? Either it's a space and a category or a specific business. And then I also have a few people who help me vet out the deals from a financial standpoint. So I also work with a company up in New York, the Patrick Company, who they work specifically with athletes, and they help vet out deals. They'll look into the actual financials, all break down all the numbers and say, hey, we think this is a relatively safe investment. We think this is an extremely risky investment, et cetera, et cetera. But just as you diversify your portfolio, I think you also have to diversify your opinion base of the people you're asking. Because if I ask my day-to-day financial advisor, he's probably going to shut down the majority of any early stage investments because he's very conservative. If I ask, venture capital guy, he's going to be like, yes, let's do them all, get into everything. So it's just that's where then it all comes back to you, and you have to be the ultimate decision maker, and you have to aggregate all this information and say, okay, what are you comfortable with? And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned is I always assumed that there was somebody out there that could tell me the answer to every single question I've ever had.
Yeah.
And the reality is every human on this planet is figuring it out as they go, just like I am. And some people are figuring it out at a faster rate and they're having more answers at certain, checkpoints, but nobody has every answer to every question. And that was a reality that hit me hard and also gave me a whole lot of excitement and motivation, because anybody can do it. Whatever you want to do, the person who did do it started out just like you.
Yeah. And it's a variety of like experiences and perspectives. And it's always being like, what is this person's incentive and where do they come from? And taking that into account.
Right.
That's
exactly.
Okay. Another hot topic question that might
great.
get the Twitter people going.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the Travis Kelce Taylor Swift situation?
In what capacity? I mean, I'm very happy for them. I mean, anybody.
Are you surprised at all at what's happened?
In terms of the coverage?
Yeah.
No, because it's possibly literally the biggest pop star in the entire world, and a multiple-time Super Bowl champion who's on a team that looks like they could potentially do it again. So I'm not surprised by it at all. I also, this is all an entertainment business at the end of the day. Like, The NFL, obviously, music industry, it's all entertainment business. The reason that the NFL is so successful as a billion-dollar enterprise, multi-billion-dollar enterprise, is because it is entertaining to people. So it does not surprise me at all that they're leaning into it and trying to take full advantage of it. I do think that they've tried to figure out the pendulum and where to swing it in terms of going a little too far of coverage and then swinging it back. But
Yeah.
I don't blame them. I mean, any football purists who are like, they need to just show the football. I'm like, well, the NFL wouldn't be the business it is if they only showed the football.
Right. It's kind of going back to what you said about like artists and athletes, and this is bringing both worlds together. I think it's fascinating. I've learned so much about football.
I think it's great. I also think it's great that they're embracing it. And I mean, public, like doing it for whatever the reasons are. I think it's cool and fun to watch it play out publicly and allow them to do that. And sometimes, in these relationships, people shy away from speaking about it, or they're trying to always hide from it. And I don't know. I think it's kind of cool that they just let it out in the open and just have fun with it.
That's awesome. Okay, so a few final things. You retired from the NFL after a 12-year career. And I think a lot about how a lot of CEOs, particularly Fortune 500 CEOs who have held the role for, let's say, a decade, and a lot of athletes who have been doing it long term, people who are kind of obsessed with their craft and obsessed with greatness end up tying their identity to their career success a little bit. Did you have any sort of existential identity crisis when you woke up the next day after you announced your retirement and you knew you wouldn't play anymore? Like, how did you reconcile that identity shift?
I didn't have that exact moment. I think especially because in our sport, you go into the off season every year. So it's not like the day after I retired, it was like, oh no, I'm not going into work today, which a normal CEO or situation would be. It came more around the training camp time, but even in training camp, I was just happy as hell not to be in training camp. So that wasn't bad. It was probably more around, the first game, the first couple games, where I remember specifically I was talking to my brother as he was getting ready to get on the bus and go to the stadium for a game. And when I sat there and I thought about my pregame meal and the music that I would play and getting on the bus and the emotions that you feel, those are the only times where I'm like, damn, like, I do miss that part of it. But then I wake up on Monday morning and my body feels great and I'm not dealing with the mental, anguish of either playing bad or losing the game or whatever it may be. So I don't miss that at all. But you absolutely, at least me, your identity does become tied to it. It's just the reality. I've been playing football since I was in fifth grade. I've been playing sport. I started skating, playing hockey when I was 3 years old. I've been an athlete my entire life, literally my entire life. And scoring goals in hockey or getting sacks in football or whatever it may be, that was a way of validation that everything that I was working towards was paying off and that everything that I was trying to do was working. So now to not have anything like that in my life, good or bad, it certainly is an adjustment to make because you have to figure out. It's not like you have to figure out how to live your life in a different, but like even in the off seasons, I was training for the season. At every point throughout the entire year, there was something that I was getting ready for. Now I'm just living life. And I think my son really, really helped. I think my wife and my son, if I was just retiring and I didn't have my family, I would be in a really, really tough spot. Because I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And I'd try and find ways to fill that void. But every single morning when I wake up, I see my son, I take him for a walk. I don't care that I'm not playing football. I don't care about scoring a touchdown. I don't care about a sack. All I care about is him smiling.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, I love that. And going off of that, in 2015, you said, at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's a game. And sometimes I'll sit there and think, in 50 years, is anybody going to care? Is anybody going to care how hard I worked? Is anybody going to care that I woke up at 3:45 in the morning to work out? So how do you answer those questions today? I know it hasn't been 50 years.
Yeah, this is hilarious because I just had this conversation yesterday with one of my former teammates who's still playing. And he was talking to me, and he was talking about a tough time he's going through, the team's not being successful, maybe not playing as well as you'd like. And he was like, it weighs on me so heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I told him, I said, this is something that I didn't learn fully until I retired. I said, last weekend I was sitting in New York in the CBS studio, and we have, all 10 games on at the same time. We have all the screens going, and we're kind of watching, and we point out the touchdowns. We're like, hey, they scored here, or the big plays. Hey, there's a sack there. But all the other plays, we can't watch them all. There's 10. You can't see every game, so you're just kind of going through. And then we do the recaps of the games, and we just show the touchdowns. We just show the highlights. And I told him, I said, you're sitting there in that locker room, or you're sitting there the next day, and you're thinking about that one play that you missed, or that one tackle that you missed, or the ball you dropped. Nobody else in the world is thinking about that. Like, no offense, and it's not in a good way or a bad way, but I was like, we put so much mental stress on ourselves, which is what makes us great, which is why we go out there and we improve and we get better. But the reality of it is the rest of the world isn't thinking about it as much as we are. So let it go. Like, move on to the next one. Be as good as you can be on the next one. And I told him, I know this is 1,000 times much easier said than done, because I couldn't do it myself. And I didn't fully realize until now, when I'm done, what that is like. And so, but you can't tell that like, they don't understand. I didn't understand. So
Yeah.
yes, I don't think in 50 years, anybody is going to care one bit about anything that we did or anything. But like I've said throughout this whole interview and what I've learned, my son will care about me spending time with him. He's going to be the one. I saw a great quote, or not quote, but a great thing the other day that was like, talking about somebody on their deathbed, and it was like, who were the people that were at their side, and it was literally just their son, their grandson, their wife. Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the only people with you at the end of this entire ride are going to be your family and maybe your closest friends. So don't care what anybody else thinks. Those are the ones that matter.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. I really encourage people to go read that 2015 profile to now. And it's like, it's kind of full circle. It's really cool to see.
Yeah.
And my final question is, how do you define the word success?
Wow. I mean, that's a great final question. It's fascinating because you could take it 100 different ways. And I think defining success depends on what you're trying to be successful at. I mean, life in general, what is success is, to me, that's, happiness. That's the bonds that you create. That's the family. That's the people. Do you make the people around you happier? Do you create a better life for your kids? I think that's success. But I think then you start to ask yourself, well, does work factor into that at all? And you say to yourself, well, if I can create a better life for my kids through work by earning more money or by doing whatever it takes, then obviously I am theoretically more successful. And then you start to think like, okay, but to create this more successful life, I have to put in this amount of hours and be away from my kids for that amount of time. So where is the balance on that? And take like a regular job. Let's say you work 40 hours a week. If you can take some overtime, you're also going to create a better life for your kid, but you're going to be away from your kid for longer. And some people say, okay, I'm just going to do that for a few years. And then all of a sudden it becomes more and more years. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, if I take even more overtime, I can be even more successful. So I think success is all about figuring out what you are trying to be successful at. For the first 33 years of my life, success was about being the greatest football player on the planet. Like, I wanted to be the truly best athlete in the entire world. Now, success looks like, if I can make my son smile or laugh, that is 100% success. And now, will that change because I'm only 34 years old and he's going to grow up and there's going to be a phase where he probably doesn't want to talk to me at all. And then I'm back to like, okay, he's off to college or he's off doing his own thing. And now what do I do? But it's a fascinating thing. And I think for me personally, success at this current moment is if my wife and son are happy and my family and friends are happy and I get to see them and spend time with them, that's success.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, JJ. This was an awesome conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.